How's it going, everybody? So, I had a message from someone who was asking me about the veganism and voluntarism issues that I responded to, and apparently this person wasn't happy that I didn't respond to, I believe it's her last reply, um, on dealing with, I think, ethical norms and species. And so I had to just answer this one question that is of utmost importance. And she says that I'm perpetuating a speciesist mindset. And to that I say, yeah, absolutely. Of course I'm perpetuating a speciesist mindset. I actually am all about supporting human beings from top to bottom as far as developing medicine, developing healthcare, efficiency and cleanliness of food, efficiency and cleanliness of housing, of course. And here's the question then that arises: how could you not be? I mean, if we're talking from, I don't know, I'm going to assume that maybe she's from a evolutionary biological standpoint as far as thinking about nature. Okay, how do you think all the other developed creatures live? They live tribally, they live in herds, they live in packs, they live in flocks. They exist in mutual protection of each other against other aggressors. You know, maybe it's buffalo or bison or something like that to a bigger predator. Whatever it is, they live and exist in nature to help each other survive and subsist in the land without getting attacked. So I really don't see how that's even, from a pure empiricism, naturalist perspective, weird. But beyond that, I think it goes into a moralism, of course. If you're going to say humans have some ultimate obligation to not harm animals in a certain way, or to not live off of them in a certain way, or treat them a certain way, I think you're going into moralism. Because now you're going into, okay, what's the fundamental question as to why humans exist and why animals exist, and so on and so forth. I think if you go in the ethical terms of, oh, again, should humans treat animals a certain way, I think you fall into the trap of nature. And the trap of nature is that humans, by their nature of existence, at least coming out of hunter-gatherer stage and even into now, find it very difficult to not cause some extreme level of harm to certain creatures, whether intentional or not, just by virtue of existence and virtue of modernity. Whether you decide to burn a turtle or you accidentally run over its legs because it happens to be crossing the highway, you tortured that turtle in a way that's irreparable. That turtle's in an extreme amount of pain for a long time. Um, Either way, it was a part of human development and existence that happened. One was intentional and malicious. The other was just by, oh, if you're driving a car, it's suddenly okay that you hurt a creature and torture them effectively. Again, this is really a very simple point, and that simple point is that speciesism is definitely a part of nature and natural selection, that's for sure. But even beyond that, in the ethical realm where humans can use reason, the point is that humans use reason to help each other out, or potentially to help each other out. They use reason to subdue the earth around them and to develop it and to find better ways to take care of each other. And that comes often through trade. Trade is the ultimate charity in terms of efficiency and building up the lowest cost to entry for getting food, water, shelter, healthcare, and so on and so forth. Um, Again, bringing in the torture aspect just to reiterate this, the issue that always comes up is what's torture? For some extreme, you could say, vegan, vegetarian, or animal rights activist, the act of owning a pet is slavery. If you have a dog, that's bringing them out of the wild, even though they're domesticated, from years of breeding, it's still torture to them, and nobody should own a pet. For some, it's nobody should, step on a fly, or nobody should ever use, animals in agriculture. Nobody should, I don't know, ever even touch a pet, right? Like, the act of touching a pet separates them from their natural state, And it's kind of funny because I always just say that this very obvious example: you put a human being on a lectern in the middle of the jungle, and they start saying, animals, join me in peace. And eventually, you might get one of those carnivorous ones to come and attack and eat that human. Whereas with humans, you can reason with other humans, you can talk with other humans to develop ethical, social norms of peace that you can't with animals because of that instinctual nature. And of course maybe there can eventually, and this is the other catch-22, you ever see those videos of maybe a guy hugging a tiger. Yeah, well, that tiger was reared by that man from birth. They were separated from their mother, and because that tiger was used to that human being, and seeing that human being as kind of like a paternal maternal figure, it led to that peaceful interaction between those two characters. Of course, there's been many instances where people have owned those types of exotic pets, and then you bring in another human being, and boom, protection mode goes on, they get attacked. So the reason that there's protectionism and speciesism is for survival. I mean, that's just really fundamental empiricism there. It's no real moral, ethical question. It's just empiricism. Yeah, creatures packed together of a certain species for protection and reproduction. Okay, wow, great, biology 101. The rest of it, as far as why it's difficult to adopt um, strong ethical norms toward animals for humans, is a part of that. And again, it doesn't mean that voluntarism isn't going to likely lead into greater empathy for animals and more humane ways of treating creatures. Absolutely, I think it will, and I think that's wonderful and great. And I think anything that can be done, personally, that alleviates that kind of suffering is absolutely wonderful. Can it be brought into, again, an ethical norm? Which ethical norms, when you have ethical norms, means that you can use reasonable defensive force against another aggressor, okay? There's a difference between a human attacking a human and a human shooting a squirrel, right? In one case, if someone was shooting a squirrel versus shooting a human, there would be an ethical norm that it is acceptable to use defensive force. It wouldn't be acceptable to go and shoot a human who's shooting a squirrel because they want stew, versus someone who is going to shoot a child because they want to turn that child into stew. That's the difference from a philosophical perspective, from a logical perspective, and even from a naturalist perspective. So I'm intentionally summing this up and responding to that one issue because it's so fundamental, and there's no point in even talking about look at these evidence of these people like torturing stuff. Yeah, I get it. There are people who do horrible things to animals in industrial development, and I do agree that unnecessarily torturing those animals, I think, ends up leading to observable issues. When we talk about um, animals being injected with hormones and the quality of meat, and caged animals who are under a lot of stress and the quality of food, I mean, that comes back to us. That does actually affect humans in a health way. That's observable, testable, repeatable. That needs to be accounted for, and I think that all the movements toward free range farming and integrating ways of keeping animals healthy but without hurting them, poisoning them, and eventually poisoning us humans is wonderful. There's nothing wrong with that. But moving into an ethical norm set that potentially turns, of course, into a legal, even if it's common law, a legal norm set, I think is very difficult, very dangerous, and moves away people from being able to reach peace as among humans, benefit humans, which I think then more naturally leads into peace as among other creatures potentially. So that's my sum on why I am a speciesist, and I hope that that was enough to kind of push your thoughts, this user Becky137. Take care.